yeah.
They look comfortable.
They do.
The pillow in the back helps, though.
It does. It's good lumbar.
The pillow in the back helps.
You're right, it's bright. The last time lights were this bright on me, I was a juvenile delinquent before I enlisted in the Air Force. So I'm having flashbacks. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. How are you?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We haven't said anything yet. That's awesome.
So this part of the program, we're very privileged to have three of our senior leaders in the logistics, sustainment, maintenance community with us to give us their thoughts on a variety of subjects. You probably know them all, but in the interest of protocol, we need to do a little intro here. Of course, to my immediate left is Lieutenant General Barry. He's the Deputy Chief of Staff of Logistics, Engineering and Force Protection, Headquarters, United States Air Force, Pentagon. Then right next to him is Lieutenant General Tom Miller. And Lieutenant General Miller is the commander of the Air Force Sustainment Center, Air Force Materiel Command, Tinker Air Force Base, Oklahoma. And of course, at the end is Chief Master Sergeant Jason Sells. He is the senior enlisted leader to the Deputy Chief of Staff for Logistics, Engineering, and Force Protection, Headquarters Air Force, Pentagon. So big hand, please, before we get started. So what I like to do is, in the interest of time, we're gonna get we want this to be a conversation, not just question, answer, but I will toss out a question out there, one that I think is important based on the feedback and talking to folks out in the field, especially the CGOs and the mid-level NCOs and senior NCOs. And then from there, probably the last 10 minutes, Q&A. So the very first question that I'd like to ask our esteemed colleagues here is, as the Secretary of the Air Force noted at the recent Warfare Symposium a couple of weeks ago, improving operational availability rates is one of his top priorities. So from an Air Force sustainment perspective, what are the challenges facing our frontline maintenance and logistics leaders, our CGOs, junior, mid-level NCOs, in improving mission capability rates? And how's the Air Force helping them overcome these challenges? So, over to you all.
Okay. So I guess I should start with just 20 seconds of saying it is awesome to be on stage with these two folks. Tom Miller, one of the most amazing logisticians we have in our Air Force and just an incredible leader. Really pleased to be on stage with him. And then our very first Air Force senior enlisted leader in Chief Sells. We've got 269,000 total force, logistics, maintenance, engineering, and force protection professionals, military, officer enlisted, civilian, Guard Reserve. And over 100,000 of those are maintenance and logistics. And we decided that it was high time to stop taking that important position out of Hyde and bringing somebody in full time. So Chief Sells is a very important part of our structure because he is our enlisted voice and our enlisted conscience as we try to make decisions that affect the force. We didn't always get that in the way that we should have before. So I'm thrilled that Chief Sells said yes when we asked him to come take this opportunity. So I just wanted to start with that. All right, so your question, sorry.
No worries.
I guess I'll harken back to to my opening comments yesterday morning, right? So even Admiral Walsh today, right, said we tried to do MC-80 and we couldn't get there. It was not for a lack of trying. We did some good things in MC-80. There were some successes. We proved that we could surge, for example, the F-16 supply chain. And everybody who said it takes 18 months to realize the benefits of a surge in a supply chain and putting resources against supply, you're not going to get any, well, that wasn't true, right? We saw almost immediate results by surging the organic repair line for F-16 parts, and we got the S rate down below 10%. I think at one point we're at like 8.7 TNMCS rate across the fleet. So we had success in MC-80. The question is, can you sustain it? And the question is, the reality is parts are kind of the easy button. putting resources against spares is kind of a easy button because you know you'll get some results as long as you don't have some of the other issues that challenge our maintainers every day, like diminishing manufacturing sources and the like. And certainly the things from, from Wednesday morning, aging aircraft, airplanes breaking more. As the aircraft age, we put more inspection requirements on them for our maintainers to go take care of, which obviously decreases your availability. We have resourcing challenges where the requirements in the sustainment enterprise are outpacing the resources that we have to apply to it. So there's a lot of challenges out there, and I would offer to you that in some ways we make those decisions at the strategic level, and then we're passing that risk to the tactical unit and asking you to manage it. I'm not sure that's the right equation. So we're going to take a lot of action and effort to try to reverse a lot of some of that, which I just mentioned. The biggest one there is resourcing. The onus of responsibility is on us to make the return on investment arguments and to make the case for increased sustainment dollars to come into the portfolio so that we can do the things that we know we need to do to build readiness in the force and to keep and retain readiness in the force. But some of the other things we're doing with repair network, right? Eliminating some of the artificialities we have between organizational, intermediate, and depot level repair. And when an organization has the capacity and capability to execute the repair just because it's coded as a depot level repair, why are we hamstringing ourselves? Let's not do that. So we're having, I think, a lot of success in a lot of the initiatives that we're putting forward and operationalizing the strategic framework that General Hurry has really taken on lock, stock, and barrel. So I think there's good news. I don't think there's enough good news, and we need to do a little bit more in that realm to get you some of the things that you need to put the readiness where it needs to be.
So I want to start with I'm glad General Barry created that position, did the advocacy for this, because why? Think about if you're a logistician, if you're a logistics officer, who matured you through all the lessons in your adult life? It was a senior NCO. I'll tell you, to me, it's the most natural thing in the world. It really is. I love the way ASPC is done now. We're senior NCO. Chief and I were talking about that before, where CGOs and senior NCOs are together because that's how they execute the mission. That's how they grow together. I think it's wonderful. So to add to General Barry's point and try not to duplicate any of it, for material availability, which is what MC80 was, it was available. That doesn't mean it's ready. It doesn't mean you have operational readiness either. You can have if you fly an airplane and it comes back code 1, it's FMC. If you don't fly it again for 7 days, it's FMC that whole time. That helps a statistic, which is not a holistic measurement of readiness. So we've got to be careful about confusing material availability with readiness. It's a component of, but it's not the whole thing. If the aircrew can't fly and get the proficiency, then you may have a ready airplane, but not a combat capability, and that was a challenge. The other piece, and General Barry hit on it too, is from the supply. There's a whole lot that goes into having the part available or not, a whole lot. But in the end, it's a 1 or a 0. The part's available or it's not available. In NMCM, it is much more opaque. Non-mission capable for maintenance for what? And so we as an enterprise really need to challenge ourselves, and our IT systems need to support this, and there's been multiple wings I'm aware of that have done we did a quick independent study in one wing in ACC, it was 20th Fighter Wing, and they said, yep, we'll do this study of studying the 6th position work unit code, unscheduled non-mission capable for maintenance for a human, for a piece of support equipment, for a facility if the jet has to be on jacks, you name it. And it told the leadership there things that they were not tracking. That's really useful for us to know what is the constraint. So all this theory of constraints discussion that we talk about, absolute applicability at sortie generation, and what is the constraint? If we know the constraint is support equipment, That makes the people that have the unenviable task of defending the POM inside the building and saying, I have data here to tell us support equipment is what the constraint is to mission generation. I think that's a huge piece of it. I think for especially CGOs, understanding the mission of the wing that you happen to be in at the time is incredibly important, because you're going to be the person that's describing the difference between the whole material availability. You are the bridge. You have got to talk to ops. You have got to understand their mission, their requirements, the challenges that they have from aircrew absorption to the different mission sets that they need to fly. Learn that so that you, when you go back into the material enterprise and you're trying to advocate for resources, you understand the mission of the executor that's going to go out and do it. So, Chief, over to you.
Yeah, well, first off to General Barry, General Miller, I really appreciate this opportunity, especially to LOA, to come up here. This is, as we talk about this, the relationship between the officer and enlisted is absolutely valuable, and I really appreciate General Barry, working through with the rest of the senior enlisted and Chief Bass to establish this position. It's, prior to being a career field manager moving up here, it's definitely, it's value added being in here and be able to interact and still be a part of the logistics field, so I do enjoy that. When I look at the readiness and, when I talk with the field and the career field managers and the functionals, support equipment. You take a look at some of our support equipment out there. Let's just use a munitions lift truck. Our jammers out there were the ones we have now were built in the 1950s. And so here we are, we're asking age technicians to still maintain support equipment that's from the 1950s. And we keep talking about we need new support equipment to be able to improve readiness, but at the same time, we have this agile footprint. So here we are now bringing in some of our previous equipment that is still using the B1-22, like the manual operated lift truck, and now here we are electrifying it. So now here we are, we're gonna have an E-molt out there to be able to help out with some of the aging equipment that's out there, but also with the agility that we need to be able to support adaptive operations. Because when you think about it, sure, we can load everything by hand, we can take that MCA team out there, be able to operate, but fatigue is such a huge issue, and that goes in the readiness piece when we look at that from the human element and from the airmen that were out there.
Great points.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Great answers. The next question here is about multi-capable airmen. There's been a lot of conversation about the Agile Combat Employment, ACE, multi-capable airmen, and what we need to do to power that concept. And since most of the MCAs, and Chief, not to put you on the spot, but most of the MCAs will be enlisted folks. I think this question will be initially directed to you, and of course, have the generals weigh in with their thoughts. Can you describe the current thinking and efforts to make the MCA reality? Where we're at the moment and where we headed?
So I don't think anybody wants to talk about MCA. MCA, your career field managers, myself, we spent a lot of time on MCA. So it's not, when we look at this is a highly dynamic operations, high-speed operations with high explosive munitions when we look at integrated combat turnarounds. And so now here we are taking our combat support, combat service support, and adding in adaptive operations with lighter, leaner force with multi-capable airmen that are cross-functionally trained in multiple skills. The challenges right now we look out there, and the great thing is that there's a lot of efforts, there's a lot of experimentation going out the wings, but the one thing is that as we're getting after this, we have the ACE governance structure. And underneath there, that's chaired by the DCOMs. And so that's where a lot of our efforts have been working with your MAGCOMs out there to standardize MCA. And that's the one thing that we saw out there. That's what the DCOMs came to us and said, right now, we don't have a standardized model. We need a baseline for how we're gonna get after MCA. So that was the very first thing we looked at that. So we were tasked as that governance structure to go out there and develop a table of authorizations. And when we developed that, it was based on the feedback from the DCOMs that we wanted a multi-capable airman that was going to be trained down, not up, with limited targeted tasks. So what does that really mean? We're talking about keeping you within your functional areas. You know, we kept seeing a lot of stories out there of the finance airman or comptroller being qualified to be able to fuel an aircraft. We even saw experimentation out there of crew chiefs being certified to load weapons. But what was the right model? What's the right mix? And so we did. We came up with the fighter CAF table of authorizations, which was published back in January. And so that was a collective effort. When you look at those 27 AFSCs on that table, 15 of those belong to the A4 enterprise. Holistically, when you look at that. When you look at some of those tasks that were out there, we took everything from the MAJCOMs, everything that you have been doing out there, what do we need in order to be able to operationalize ACE to be able to execute this? And so we took all those tasks, we put them in there, and we identified with your functionals to determine, okay, which task within your functional area and your two-digit that's on there, and what is the common thread that we can be able to train and scale to. The challenge is when we looked at this, we delivered this, but guess what? It's still on OJT. It's still cross-utilization training to execute this. Yesterday I had a chance to sit down at lunch and talk with the MUNS DO out of Mountain Home, Captain Enrique, wherever you're out there. By the way, that was the lieutenant that was getting the pictures with Chief Master Sergeant in the Air Force the other day, so he's a major select, just to let you know. And I asked for some honest feedback, because that's the one thing that we get from the MAJCOMs, but asked for some feedback, and as he looked at it he goes, yes, we've got the TOA, we know what it is, but it's taken about 12 months to be able to train this. That's way too long. So the next step is we have to institutionalize this. That's where we're at right now, trying to institutionalize. What task do we implement that we thread into the CFETP, that we start training in at the tech school? Because, oh, by the way, there's expeditionary skills to go along with this. So we've got expeditionary skills coupled with functional skills that go into there to be able to develop a model that's there. The fact is, it's not perfect. We call this MCA 1.0. We're looking to, it's going to be a semi-annual review as we go through these tables. So we've got the fighter CAF. We're moving on to the MAF model next, working to those concept of employments. And then the final thing we look at this is removing the barriers. What policy is out there that is preventing us from getting after ACE? Looking at multi-capable. We just worked with the A4L, updated some policy. Now we can have non-2W1s out there certified to be able to load, getting after the ACE concept with MCA. So it's a challenge. We've moved through this. The future, well, if you go take a look at MOTAR, the capability is endless when you look at programs like that. Those are the things that we need to be able to give the airmen to be able to operationalize, to have control of their training, to be able to build proficiency, but also to be able to track the readiness at the same time. So huge challenge trying to get after this. It's not easy, but we definitely value the feedback, and we're trying to get after this to be able to make sure that we can get after adapted ops.
Great points, Chief. And I think, you know, I had heard, especially in my previous job at ACC quite a bit, we actually worked several issues together, you know, going kind of through the fog and friction of a new idea. There's always fog and friction with a new idea. This, in some ways, is a revisit of an idea from before in some ways, but I think it's important. I have no doubt that we have airmen smart in every career field that are smart enough with the training to do the other task in another career field. It becomes a bandwidth issue. It becomes a timing. You know, I've heard the same comment, whether it's, you know, a career field that's completely not related to aviation on the flight line at all. Can they? I'm sure they can. The time needed to be fair to that airman, to put him in that environment, that is, you know, it's loud, there's a lot of moving things, there's fuel, there's munitions, well, maybe molts don't move as fast as jammers, but there's a lot of moving stuff out there. So the time bandwidth that a commander has to go, okay, there's only 24 hours in every day. How am I gonna adjudicate where to spend that time on an exercise where we utilize the skills under MCA? If it's loading, there's a very good reason why we have the safety rules and the proficiency rules in the munitions and weapons area. So it becomes time. And then if different JFACs have different requirements, how much of a difference is there? Is the Venn diagram that's in my head overlaps each other quite a bit? Then for the force provider, they can work to the middle, the overlap of that Venn diagram and work those skills. And then if there's a difference here and a difference there for a specific JFAC, they can work the edge. But I think that's part of the journey is you can have some standardization without constraining the goodness that can come from MCA. I think both are possible. I think they are actually both possible. I don't have a doubt that an airman that we have in the Air Force doesn't have the intellect or the skills to do another task in a different career field. I think bandwidth is a piece, and the hard work that the teams are doing to look at that, where does it make the most sense? Because it's sometimes very easy to come up with a example on a dry erase board in a conference room that sounds really good when you're talking to other people. But when you're walking, a 20-year-old through, they're learning their own career field, they're learning something new, it becomes more, it's personal. You've got to take care of the person to make sure you're setting them up for success. So I applaud the work that's being done now. I think we're getting better for sure.
So if the folks from Canon are here, you can check your phone now because you heard this earlier today. But take it back about 18, 24 months ago, right? We are, as the governance structure that the chief mentioned, we're all in a room talking about agile combat employment, and the topic of multi-capable airmen came up. And we're walking through what we think multi-capable airman is, what's the definition, what do we really want to get out of it, what's the end game, and a little bit of how we might do it. And as I looked around the room, I realized that everybody in that room had an O in their pay grade. And I can tell you that most of the multi-capable airmen that are going to be out there have an E in their pay grade. And I thought, holy cow, we're running with scissors. So I am so proud of our CFMs who really grabbed this and owned it, and have done yeoman's work to get us to where we are today on the multi-capable airman implementation, because we are implementing. As Chief said, we're not all the way there yet. We're still learning as we go, but the work they've done has been absolutely phenomenal. I think General Miller and Chief Sells did an awesome job of talking about what multi-capable airman is. Let me tell you what it is not. It is not a manpower drill. It is not an attempt to do more with less. We are not looking to say that because we have multi-capable airmen, that 55-person age flight can now be 45. That is not what we're saying. So please, if you start to hear that at your installations and at your wings and your squadrons, there is nobody in this enterprise, Pentagon, MAGCOMs, elsewhere, that are saying, hey, if we become more efficient, we can save money. We are not talking about that whatsoever.
Thank you, gentlemen. Very complex issue at the moment that you guys are tackling admirably. So we got about 15 minutes left. What I'd like to do, if possible, is start with the questions. I've got a couple questions, but I think it's more important that the questions come from the audience. So do we have questions already? Can we get that started?
Yes, sir. We have questions.
Let's go ahead, ma'am.
All right. Where to start?
Where to start?
Is the 50-50 rule outdated for our current strategic environment, and why can't, quote, organic, end quote, include U.S. companies?
Include?
U.S. companies.
I'll take that one. So in 30 seconds or less, 50-50 broadly is U.S. statute, so that 50% by service, essentially of the dollars appropriated to do depot level maintenance, is done organically inside of government. Why is it there? It goes with another law, if you're Googling, called CORE, which is important to think of them together. It gets about what capability should the United States government have inside of government. And there's a number of reasons for doing that. One is, say in a made-up example in your head, we have one kind of capability within that's important to us in aviation, and it's done solely by industry, and that company gets bought by another company that may not have the same national alliance to the United States of America that it currently, and that's harder to determine now than it ever was before. There's many reasons. So 50-50 exists there as a boundary to keep all the services, not just the Air Force, but all the services, saying, hey, you really need to have core capability ready within the United States military to meet COCOM requirements. It's still not nearly the right measurement that we should have, because 50-50 is by service. You can have 100% by just the 50-50 rule of an MDS done contractually, and 100% over here done organically. What I think, why not U.S. companies? Something I haven't considered before. I think where we see success and where U.S. companies do participate a lot is in partnerships. So if you go right up here to Ogden, and if any of you took the ALC tour for General Gibbs complex, good on you. It's an exciting one. There's 2 others if you want to go see those. They're exciting too. That one has a great example for both F-35 and F-22 partnered workload, where that is a partnership, and it is government mechanics doing work inside a government facility, and it counts on the government side of 50-50. I don't know that anybody would argue that 50-50 is the answer. I think we as the services do need some left and right parameters to keep us from making a decision that we can't come back from. It wasn't always 50-50. It was actually 70-30 before, and 60-40, and now it's 50-50. So I won't suck up any more time with the 50-50 discussion. If you want more on that, I got some more opinions on it. I'd be happy to share with you. Is there anything to?
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you, General Miller. Next question. There have been some great ideas, lots of great ideas presented throughout the conference. So how do we now translate those to RFPs and contracts so the industry side can get after it?
Where's the acquisition officer out there? So you know, part of our process, I think, in the Air Force is having this validated requirement, turning it into a program of record, and then being able to get the program, the idea, the initiative done at scale. That is a process, right? And I think if you look at, to the point of the question, if you look at a lot of what we have talked about here today, some of the things that you've seen since you've been here, whether it be on the exhibit floor or what was presented on stage, what you might hear tomorrow with the Ether Sprint. Our challenge has long been our challenge has not been a lack of great ideas and innovation. Our challenge has been taking that innovation and that great idea and scaling it. Scaling it for the good of not just a unit, but scaling it for the good of the Air Force. And we've got plenty of technologies, right, not necessarily related to some of the innovation we've seen, that never crossed the valley of death, and mature science and technology to a certain level, and then languish and never become a program of record. It is not just the innovation that we see that struggles sometimes to get to that broader scaling part. I think when you heard from the Tesseract folks as but one use case, what they have been able to do to help get those innovative ideas and programs across the line, and make them programs of record so that you can go out to industry and take this Airman's good idea and actually scale it with the help of our industry partners. I think that says a lot about what we're trying to do to get after it.
Thank you, sir. Question for the Chief. Chief, you haven't been with us very long. What do you want to tackle most in your time with the Log Nation community?
I'm glad you got that question.
Oh, softball. All right. You know, I look at it from this perspective when we see here, and one of the main things is, I got to say, is multi-capable. And why is it so important? Because it's important to our senior leaders. Getting after adaptive operations, it's such a challenge to be able to work through this and be able to navigate to make sure that we're not coming up with ideas on what we think MCA should be from our cubicles at the Pentagon, but taking what you're doing out there in the field and making sure that it's repeatable and sustainable, and that there's a model out there that we can get after agility operations. So it's one of the biggest things that we talk about. It's one of the main things that I work with all the CFMs.
Sure. So, Chief, if I can ask my own follow-up. For the supervisors out there that are genuinely concerned about asking more, even more, of their troops, what caution would you provide? What encouragement would you provide? How would you respond to that, Chief?
Yeah, asking more from the airmen that are out there. The thing that you got to look at is we have to know our airmen's capability. We have to know what they can handle. We talk about the bandwidth. The fact is not all airmen are type A. We have great Americans serving out there. Not all of them are going to be chiefs. And so when we look at this, you have to know the capacity that your airmen can handle. You really have to get to know them, understand what makes them tick, and what makes them drive, and trying to find that in there, and just not taking this as we're looking at, you know, let's take multi-capable, trying to take that JQS, that 797, adding more task into there. Can they be able to handle that? So you got to be able to find that balance, that threshold there, to make sure that that your airmen out there can be able to handle this as we move forward.
Thanks, Chief. I appreciate that.
Can I just pile on?
Yes, sir.
I agree with everything Chief said. But I think the other part of this, too, is from a leadership perspective, right, is making sure our airmen understand the why. It's a basic leadership fundamental, right? It's a basic leadership principle. That if you can connect the airmen to the mission, if you can connect the airmen to why it is you're doing what you're doing, right? If you get that narrative out there and fully explain it to them so there's transparency in what we're trying to do, and that it's not a manpower drill, it's really about operational effectiveness and giving them tools to be even more successful and more survivable if they are called to serve in that capacity, right? It's about explaining the why. So you've really got to get after that and offer to them the compelling reason why we need their help to do this.
If I could add one more piece to it that's different, is I've talked to a number of airmen who've done exercises where they've, testing the MCA concept, and they love it. They're like, this is why I came in the Air Force. I wanted to totally do this. Everything is not an exercise. And then the leadership challenge of going back and say, okay, we're not doing an integrated combat turn today. We're flying a training sortie, and it doesn't involve this new skill that you've got. It's a leadership challenge to impart to them that what they were doing that's not in the MCA realm is still really important. I mean, that's how the Air Force generates the readiness, is because of what you guys do every day. So there's a leadership challenge that many of you in this room have been on deployments. And on the deployment, oftentimes the level of responsibility gets pushed to a lower level, and you have a staff sergeant or a tech sergeant comes back from the AOR, and they were like totally in charge. And then when they come back, they're totally not in charge. and that's a morale issue for oftentimes an NCO, a young officer. And so just I'd offer, keep that in your leadership toolkit of knowing that you could have somebody that comes off the high of this great, super cool thing we did last week when we went to the FOB that we set up on the other side of base. And what they do every day is important too, and that's a leadership challenge.
Thank you. That'll wrap up the audience questions. Mr. Norris, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay,
sir.
thank you. Before we wrap this up, do you have any closing comments, gentlemen?
Chief?
Chief?
Sure. So obviously, yes. So can I get one thing? Can I get the enlisted in the room? Can I get you to raise your hand for me? The enlisted in the room. So take a look around.
That's good.
All right. Thanks. Chief Sam's got both arms up back there. Thanks. So it's important, right? We have AFSA, we have AFA, we have these leadership symposiums that are out there. This is the Log Nation Leadership Symposium. And the one thing we talk about with me being up here with our leaders shows the relationship between the enlisted and the officer. So to the officers out there that did bring your enlisted with you, thank you. This is my first LOA, to be honest. I've always heard about this, never participated in it, but this has absolutely been value added just to be able to get that relationship there and be able to get to the intimate setting with the vendors and with the airmen here to get this feedback that we don't normally get. So I really appreciate this opportunity.
Great points, Chief. And I think that trust is the piece, the thing that that I would offer to you. Great lessons and great discussion in LOA, and still tomorrow there's more. When you walk back from everything you've learned during this conference, there's a lot of good things that happen. Most of the good things that happen at LOA happen in the chapter, in the wing you're in, and there's no preclusion to bringing your pro super or your superintendent with you to that chapter meeting. Have a debate. I mean, Joe's, it's a thing. I mean, it's really a thing. That's who you lead through hard problems with. It's who you learn from, when, especially, not just when you're a general officer. I learn from Chief Schultz all the time. I really do. So think about the LOA chapter that's not the conferences. Wonderful. The team here did a great job. When you go back and it's not a conference and everything's in your control, within your control is, we're meeting at Friday at 1500 in this conference room, and we're going to talk about this super hard problem we got. Everybody, come on in. Senior NCO presence in that room means you're going to be more informed. You're going to make non-sterile, good idea ferry without the resources and scar tissue to inform it well. You're going to have your senior NCO teammate that's teaching you anyway. Be there for the robust discussions about the future logistics. So, sir, over to you.
Thanks, Tom. There are challenges out there. I think you've heard of some of them since you've been here. You live some of them back at your unit and in your squadron. We are not tone deaf to those challenges. Your senior leadership knows and understands that there are challenges out there. The solutions are not easy, but we know they're out there and know that we are working on the solutions to the things that make it more difficult than it should for you to execute this mission of sortie generation and persistent mission generation. We are actively working it. I'll circle back again to yesterday, right? But we don't have all the answers. We don't. And I think as you've seen since you've been here, a lot of those answers are coming from you and the men and women who are back at home station executing the mission every day. Those are the answers that we need. Those are the things that we need to understand. Those are the things that will help us get past today's challenge so that we can meet the challenge of tomorrow, which is what the NDS says is a potential conflict with a peer or near-peer adversary. Thank you for what you do. Those challenges make it a little bit harder to do what it is we ask you to do. But you do it magnificently. It is awesome to go do a base visit and watch a wing, a group, a squadron, a flight execute their mission and just make magic happen. It happens every day on every flight line in our United States Air Force. And that's you, your leadership, and your airmen who do that every single day. So thank you for what you do, and know that your leadership is engaged and committed to get it better.
Thank you. On behalf of the LOA team, ladies and gentlemen out in the audience, gentlemen, thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to provide valuable insights on the many challenges that Air Force faces, and as you mentioned, General, we can definitely tackle them with everybody in this room. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Wes. Thank you.